Good morning and welcome to the Mesa City Council study session for May the 19th. I believe Councilmember Glover is going to join us via telephone. Mr. Glover, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, thank you. Then we're all present and accounted for. First item on our agenda is to hear a presentation and provide direction on funding options, including sales taxes for public safety, staffing, and equipment needs in higher education projects. Candace, welcome.
So this is gonna be a team effort. So
that's great.
So Mayor, I'll go through the PowerPoint slides, the presentation, and Candace and Jeff are here to help back me up, make sure I don't go astray in the presentation. So Council, 2 weeks ago, you requested that the staff come back and bring you some funding recommendations regarding public safety needs and the higher education projects that we've been talking about for the past month. And just to begin, the first area that we looked at as in the past of what Mesa has done to fund projects similar to this is we looked at the sales tax history. Back in May of 1998, the voters approved a 0.5% increase in the sales tax. Back at that time, 0.25% of that 0.5% was set to expire in 8 years. I'm assuming that was because there was a lot of capital projects that were included in there, and so the assumption was that those projects such as a community arts center, pools, bus pullouts, and others would be funded in those first 8 years as capital, and the remaining 0.25% would continue, and included in that long list of items were firefighters, police officers. I also talked about increasing library hours and a variety of other services. So that was the funding approach that was used back in 1998. Again, it was a dedicated funding and for health, safety, and quality of life. What we've done since then, we've been able, after the 8 years and continuing since that time, and Candace can tell you about this, is we've essentially at this time, that 0.25% that was remaining from that 0.5% that was approved in 1998 continues to support the police officers and the firefighters that were funded back in that time. And so we track that, and really at this point that those funds are only sufficient to cover those costs at this time. So there's no other additional services that are being provided from that remaining 0.25%. It continues to fund police and firemen.
I'm sorry, Mr. Luna.
Do you know how many public safety personnel are currently being funded with that?
Yes, there are currently 120 police officers and 65 firefighters that are being funded by that funding source.
So we'll go to the next slide. So then in 2006, which was, of course, 8 years when that 0.25% was going to expire under the 1998 plan, the voters were again asked to approve a 0.5% sales tax increase, which would have raised the total local sales tax to 1.75%. Within that 0.5%, the city presented it in two parts. One was a 0.3% that was going to be dedicated for street construction, operations, and maintenance, and then the other 0.20% was used for general governmental purposes. So any general fund purpose really is kind of how we look at it. So today that was approved. On that same ballot was a proposal to a primary tax proposal to fund general government services, and that failed. The sales tax did pass. Since that time, we've had the street maintenance fund from sales tax, which we track and provide in our reports each month to show how much is tracked there, so that we've set up a dedicated separate funding fund for transport or for streets and maintenance, and so we track that. And then the 0.2% just continues to flow into the general government purposes for the city. So that was approved in 2006. So that was the last time, I believe, that a sales tax initiative was presented to the voters. And that seems to have worked pretty well. Just to kind of put in context, I know this is small, but this is just taking by population the city's in the valley and showing where they stand as far as population and where they fall as sales tax. Mesa being the third largest city in Arizona, our sales tax still falls below that of Phoenix and Tucson at this time. There's some cities that are smaller than us and a variety of others from the west side that have rates that are much higher than us. The next slide, though, I think is telling. This is kind of really how the valley's been now looking at the sales tax. This rate shows it from going from left to right. The percentage, the highest percentage of local sales tax down to the lowest. Then you can see Mesa down in the bottom quartile. And not only does that show that we have a fairly low local sales tax rate, but also if you'll notice that this is tracking both retail sales tax rate in the or orange color, maybe, and the lighter blue color is the food tax rate. Mesa is one of only 3 cities in the valley, I think in the state actually, but I know in the valley for sure, that does not impose a local sales tax on food. So even, I think that's just telling that not only do we have a fairly low sales tax rate, but also the base of goods that applies to is less than many of the other communities in the area. So what we would propose is following this a trend, and I think the Mesa seems to be successful. In Mesa is considering an increase in the local sales tax. We've shown you here in this chart how the current local sales tax of 1.75% is divided up. Again, we track the 1.2% that goes to general government operations. The street maintenance is a dedicated, the 0.3%, and the 0.25% from 1998 are all continued to be tracked separately and identified by those expenses. And we would propose then that the council would consider putting a question on the ballot for an increase of another 0.25%, which would fund both public safety and higher education projects, which would bring our total local sales tax to 2%. If you were to look back on those charts, again, it isn't a dramatic change from our position today as far as where we stand in relation to other cities, our competitive set, either by population ranking or even by the local area. And again, I think you have to consider that there may be cities around us that have a lower local sales tax rate, but they also collect food tax with their rate also. So with that proposal, if we were to follow through with that, and so I'm just going to continue with this assumption, if we were to adopt a 0.25% sales tax rate, that would provide about $24 million. I picked $24 million because that's easy math. It's a little bit less than that today, but we expect the next couple of years to be at $24 million. So just for the purposes of being able to demonstrate how we would use that $24 million to be collected annually, we would propose to divide that evenly between public safety needs and the higher education project. So $12 million apiece. And then on the public safety side, what we would propose is, and some lessons learned in the past, is oftentimes we focus and recognize the need to hire and bring on additional personnel. We understand that's a significant need, and we all agree with that. However, if we do not recognize that with each additional firefighter and police officer comes a commitment also of vehicles, radios, and other equipment, it often puts a lot of pressure and makes it difficult for the department to have to stretch their resources in order to equip new personnel. So what we would propose, and we've spoken with both the police and fire chiefs' offices about this idea, and they seem to be comfortable with this concept that if the $12 million was to be dedicated to public safety funding, 80% of that, maybe a little bit more than 80% of that, we would set aside directly for personnel cost, hiring and bringing on new personnel. And the other, maybe just less than 20%, would be set aside for what we call life cycle replacement. So again, vehicles, radios, and equipment that are necessary as we bring those individuals on. That would assure us that we would have equipment to go forward. Now, I also would suggest, and I think both police and fire would acknowledge this. There are some items that both of them share together that are very important that they would like to see funded out of here. For example, we have a CAD system upgrade that needs to be implemented fairly soon in the next couple of years. Certainly funds like this, while they may not be able to cover the entire cost, could help us move in that direction. So that's the assumption going forward. Based on that assumption, we would then, again, this is trying to follow the models that we've used in the past when we've had a sales tax dollars, how we split those between police and fire. We would propose that about 60% of that 80% of the $12 million be dedicated to police personnel cost. And we've identified those costs here of 36 sworn positions and about 4 civilian staff. So we've met with the departments, making sure that even when we hire this many new sworn positions, we do need the appropriate level of civilian staff to support them, whether it's payroll and purchasing and other functions. I want to remind the council in the next slide that while this does, we've heard the number of around 90 sworn officers are needed or would be ideal for the police department, and we want to work towards that goal. With the 12 sworn positions that are in the proposed budget that's before the council and the additional 36 sworn positions that would be included here, we would get more than halfway to that 90 sworn positions in a very short period of time. So I think that would help make a big strides towards getting us to the kind of the ideal situation that we're trying to get to with police staffing. The next slide shows where we would propose the remaining 40% of those funds go for fire to support the fire department. We've met with the fire department. I think we all, with this number of staff that you see here before you, which is a total of 27 positions, these 27 positions would be able to support 2 future fire stations. Now, there's not funding in the sales tax initiative for the actual fire stations or the apparatus. We would anticipate that that would be addressed by a future secondary bond election. But we often, when we have the funds to do the capital improvements for fire stations, we often are stretched for the personnel costs. This would provide us the personnel so that we could, as soon as we built those stations, we would know that we'd have the funding and the resources to staff them immediately. So this is the proposal for the fire department and the fire staffing that's there. Again, this is just giving you an idea of the types of items in the police department that would be funded out of that life cycle dollar amount that we set aside, of the total amount for public safety, the $12 million, as we set aside a little less than 20%. Here's some items that would be identified that could fit within that category. Again, Mayor and Council, these would be decisions that councils would make each year, and we would report those to the council so that we would bring the dollar amounts to council and identify those items. Again, here's some items from fire and medical. We just wanted to give you a sense of the types of equipment and that they've identified now that could be funded certainly from these new dollars if they are approved. All right, so that completes the public safety portion of this discussion. Let me go to the higher education. Just a quick reminder, what we've done in the higher education, we recognize that there's potentially a lot of improvements that could be done to support higher education, but we wanted to make sure we could manage the entirety of the program within the proposed allocation of resources. And so we've kind of tried to be very conservative as we move forward in our commitment as far as the facilities and projects that we would take on in the initial phase. And so just a reminder again, the first phase is not all the buildings that you see colored there. It's only buildings A and B, which would be part of the first phase, which would provide us about 185,500 square feet of higher education space inside that municipal plaza. This is all just in phase one. but also include improvements to about 10 to 12 acres of public civic space around the city block. We have identified, and we've had this discussion about the need for parking to accommodate the replacement of parking that's currently on the City Hall complex. And while we haven't made a final decision on that, we know that there are possibilities, that we have options, which we feel good about, that there's a variety of options that we can pursue. But we felt like it's important also to identify that as a need and a resource as we move forward with this initiative. We've also committed that this is a higher education initiative, and we're pleased to say that we've been able to meet with Benedictine and talk about their needs. If Council recalls, when we took on the renovations of the old hospital to accommodate Benedictine coming to Mesa, which it's been worked out very well. We were not able to, and the need didn't exist at the time, to build out the entire space of that facility, and we had a limited budget at the time. So what we would propose is that we would complete out the remaining 26,000 square feet, I think is what we've estimated, that remains to be finished out, so that it can be programmed for faculty and students to continue to grow and expand the programs at Benedictine University. So that's also included in our first phase of the higher education initiative projects. So this next slide gives you a range, and Council, I will tell you, I know what happens. I put this number out there and it gets carved in concrete, but I will tell you we have not done any detailed drawings or design. We've done this based on square footage, estimated numbers based on previous experiences with ASU buildings that have been built, and we've tried to put a little bit of inflation in there in order to accommodate the fact that it won't be done for a few years. We've tried to come up with dollars related to acreage of park space that we're familiar with, that we've done in the recent past. We've looked at the parking. We're given a range there. We haven't made any decisions how much of that parking might be surface parking, elevated parking, and even the possibility of underground parking. So all those are there. So we've allocated a dollar amount for that, 10 to 12 million. The Benedictine build out is probably a safer number because we've been able to spend, we have the recent build out of that. We have the information about it, what we spent to build out that space. Most recently, we've had architects walk through the area and identify the space that needs to be built out. So that's probably in a closer, predictable range than some of the other numbers. And then the offsite improvements around the City Hall complex are also necessary, mostly related to street and infrastructure improvements that would be needed. They're pretty minimal for a project of this site because we already have several buildings on the site that already have the infrastructure and the street improvements that are needed. So we've given you a range from about $108 million to about $127 million. We'll know more information as we bring in design and teams, engineering teams to help us with defining the scope and the projects, the details of the projects. So that would just be phase one of the higher education projects. Phase two would be the completion of the remaining two buildings, the buildings D and C, which would then add another almost 80,000 square feet, which we estimate would be about another 32 million. We're not proposing that would be included in our first phase. It's only if we have the capacity of funding to support that either in the near future, or that would be something later on. What we would propose then again is taking the $24 million that would be as estimated to be generated annually from the 0.25% sales tax. We would divide it equally between public safety and the education projects. Most likely on the higher education projects, much of that will be used to pay off bond debt necessary to pay off the capital improvements for these projects. So that would be a dedicated source that we would pledge to pay off those bonds. And I think the next step slide is just what we're proposing, Mayor and Council. I will be briefing you after this discussion in an executive session about where we are with the IGA, with ASU that needs to go to the Board of Regents by the end of the month. And so we're anticipating that we'll be bringing that to council action on the 26th next week. Then the Board of Regents would be hearing or considering the approval of that IGA on the 8th and 10th. We'll brief council here in a minute in the executive session. We do have there are milestones inside that agreement that if council doesn't call for an election, if election isn't successful, a variety of different measures where if those benchmarks aren't met, then the agreement goes away and there's no obligation on the city's part to continue with the project. Again, we would need to call for the election. It's a November 15th. When's the election? November 8th, sorry. November 8th. I'm always late to the election. So November 8th election. We would have to call that election based on our schedule of meetings and council's schedule of availability. We're looking at June 20th as the council meeting when we call for the election to place these items on the ballots. So Mayor and Council, that's our presentation, and Jeff and Candace will answer all the questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Brady. I think we all know that we challenged city staff and Mr. Brady as a result of these issues that became evident over the last few weeks and months to come back with a proposal. And I know that staff has worked hard, and there's been a lot of meetings with ASU and with other institutions to get to this point. So Mr. Brady and city staff, thank you for the work that you've put into this to bring this presentation and this proposal forward. I'm very supportive of the proposal that Mr. Brady has shared with us. It's become evident to me over the last year and a half as the mayor of Mesa that we have two overriding needs in our community. Public safety, of course, being one of them, which was highlighted by the budget presentations from our police and fire departments over the last few weeks. We have a great public safety department. I would say even an elite public safety department. And the events of the last week, I think, have highlighted that. We've had a horrible plane crash at Falcon Field Airport and lost 2 lives. But our department was prepared with the proper training and equipment, both fire and police, to respond in a very admirable way to that. 2 great educators in our community have suffered horrible bike accidents this week. And our thoughts and prayers are with Mr. Hogan and Mr. Malin as they struggle in the hospital right now. Those lives were saved, I think, in part due to the great public safety response that we have in our community. So we do a great job when it comes to public safety, but we are under stress right now. We have different parts of our community that have different needs and different challenges. We're aging in part of our community. We're brand new in part of our community. So we're asking our public safety departments to do a lot, and they need more resources. They need more staffing. So this is an absolute need, and it's important that we go to the voters and get authorization to provide the needed resources to our public safety folks. I would put the education issue, frankly, also at just as high. In order for us to experience the economic development and to have the workforce that we need to attract talent to our community and to provide an opportunity for our children and grandchildren to continue to live here and to thrive here and to have good places to work here, we've got to double down on our commitment to education. If people come to Mesa, Arizona, and they are presented with the obvious idea that we are very committed to education, if they're tripping over institutions of higher education and bumping into great K-12 schools and they're aware of our wonderful early education opportunities, that reputation is going to pay dividends for our community over and over and over again, and it's going to create jobs, and it's going to maintain the vitality of our community. So I think these 2 issues are critical. And so I'm anxious to go to our community and to campaign for this and to ask for their support. And I think that this is a message that will resonate with our community and for people that want to continue to see Mesa to see Mesa continue to be a great place to raise a family. So thank you for the time and effort that's gone into the preparation of this. Thank you to the community partners that have stepped up and been willing to engage in this conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the public support that has already been manifest. I know we'll discuss some of the details in our executive session with regard to the ASU agreement. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, a week from now, a lot of those issues will be ironed out, and we'll be ready to march forward. I'm anxious to hear from the rest of the council. I know we do have a few requests to speak from the public as well. Mr. Kavanaugh.
Thank you. You and I were part of the council that put together the 1998 quality of life tax. And what's important for voters is for them to understand what is being proposed and who's going to pay for it and how it's going to be paid, and to follow through on that. I think the city has a very good track record on following through on the 1998 quality of life tax, as well as the more recent 2006 tax, as well as the bond issues that we've done. The mantra that I chant is promises made, promises kept. And I have been in support of sales tax increase. We've worked a lot longer on the public safety side, but I also support and recognize, obviously, the need for resources for higher education in Mesa, whether it's community college or other colleges and universities. There are important needs in all those areas. That's why we as a council made it a priority a number of years ago for higher education institutions here. The amount of money that's being proposed in this initial presentation for higher education, I don't have a disagreement on that estimated amount under the proposal. However, those of us who have been here over the last 8 years have seen the devastating impact of cuts to public safety over that time. We've also known about the need to bring on replacements for our public safety personnel who will be retiring in large numbers over the next several years. So we've got very big issues there. And quite frankly, I think the 0.25% increase is simply not enough. I think, colleagues, at least we should consider an amount higher than that. My preference would be to go to 0.5. I don't necessarily agree that the allocation should be equal between public safety and higher education. I think if I were a voter, I would say, yeah, higher education is important to me, but public safety is more important. And I want to make sure that our public safety services for me and my kids, and my grandkids, are going to be adequate to meet the needs of a growing community and an aging community. So I would hope as we discuss this over the next several weeks, we look at other options. I simply would prefer increasing the percentage, what is proposed, which I think is conservative and well presented, and I appreciate that. And then obviously, as Council Member Finter wisely said some time ago, the Sun Devil's in the details of for the agreement, and that's going to be a work in progress because, quite frankly, those of us on council saw what is being proposed less than 24 hours ago, and so that will be a work in progress, I'm sure. But thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. Council, Mr. Thompson.
And crazy enough, I actually agree with my colleague on this.
Wait a minute,
I've never been. I can't support a tax increase, but a sales tax increase. But I do agree with my colleague that I just don't think public safety is getting enough. And $24 million and they're getting 12. I think we can do better.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Luna.
First of all, I want to thank city staff for coming up with a wonderful presentation. You did a real good job in trying to figure out the best course in terms of how we resolve the situation. I certainly appreciate the proposal relative to higher education. The higher education coming into community certainly is going to have a multiplier effect. It's going to bring more people into the city of Mesa, and hopefully it'll generate some market rate housing for our community. I really appreciate the fact that we're going to be working with Benedictine University. As you know, I have a real strong commitment to that university. To me, it's very important that it continues to succeed and thrive in our city of Mesa. We as a city need to make sure that we continue to support Benedictine University. But having the relationship with ASU is going to be a real positive move for our city. Certainly, I understand the issues related to public safety. You know, public safety is really important for our community. We want to make sure that our community is safe, that we have personnel that's going to be available to deal in those, when we get into situations where we want to protect our community. Certainly, I would, we're just exiting the throes of the Great Recession. A 1/4 sales tax certainly to me is a reasonable tax that we can look at. Certainly, I would love to have more money going into public safety. I think it's a real need, but I'm not opposed of looking at perhaps even looking at a 1/2 cent tax as we move forward. Again, we are in Mesa. It's a conservative community, and we want to make sure that we're competitive. We don't want people buying stuff out of the communities. We want them to come and buy stuff here in the city of Mesa. So it becomes quite competitive. So I think this is a reasonable approach in trying to deal with the situation, and hopefully can we move forward. But I wouldn't be opposed of looking at some kind of increase, especially when it relates to our public safety.
Thank you. We do have a few requests to speak, and I don't mean to cut off any discussion with council, but it might be productive to continue, and let's hear from some of the folks that are present from the public. I've invited Charles Gregory from Benedictine to come. Charlie, thank you for being here. We sing your praises probably not often enough, but we certainly appreciate the great commitment that Benedictine has made to the city of Mesa. We hope that you feel an equal commitment from us, and thank you for you are a jewel in our community, and we're looking forward personally. One of the things I'm most excited about this proposal is the opportunity for us to provide additional support for Benedictine, but we're anxious to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning. It's good to see each of you again this morning. Let me give you a little history real quick, and that's the fact that we came 4 years ago, and if we had it to do over again, we would still come again. The community has been everything that we expected it to be, and then some, as far as welcoming, as far as supportive of what we're trying to do. And when we came here 4 years ago, we came with the intention of trying to retain and hold the brain trust, particularly the 6 high schools, 6 Mesa Public High Schools. That was very important to us. We started out on a hope and a prayer, literally, and it's moved from that. I think we started out with about 65 students. As of last Friday, we have registered 106 more students than we had this time last year, full-time traditional age. Our graduate program has taken off, so we've gone from probably coming in around 60, 65 students to an enrollment in our 3rd year, total enrollment of graduate and undergraduate of somewhere in the neighborhood of 350, 60, 70 students. And we're already 108 ahead of that as this time last year. But that's numbers just tell part of the story. The students that we're bringing in, we felt like we had to our bread and butter was local. The bulk of our population is coming, athletics is bringing in students from out of state. Good students, good academic students, student athletes, not athletes that happen to be students. And they're contributing to the community with a volunteer service. That's what we came here for. But the one thing that we're lacking, we're not able to move as quickly as we'd like to. We don't have the resources, quite honestly. It's taken a lot to bring faculty in here. It's taken a lot to bring students in here. It's taken a lot to bring staff in here, but it's taken even more to provide the services that so many of our students need. Writing skills, comprehension skills, these things, because the students that we attract primarily are good risk. They're good students, but they need the support that an institution like Benedictine can give them to put them into the community. We have programs on the table to work with business and industry to help prepare a better employee for them so that they can retain that employee and grow their business. Those programs are all on our books. We have one small problem that we can't get them to market, and we don't have the resources to do that. if we're able to, if this initiative goes through, we're able to take the resources that we're currently using to just keep us going, to invest in the marketplace, to invest in those business and industries, to help businesses meet their need, to help these 6 high schools with their graduation rate and bringing those students to hopefully Benedictine or some of our sister institutions here. In other words, to create more of an economic driving force for the community. That's why we came. An institution can't come. We didn't come here to get rich, because if you're starting out an institution, the good news is you're starting out an institution. The bad news is you're starting out an institution because it comes with it a great deal of sacrifice and a great deal of expense to something else. But we made the decision here that Mesa was not an expense to us. It was an investment in the community. And Mr. Mayor, we're flattered and pleased to be brought into this initiative. We support the initiative for what it can mean to our community that we can do as Benedictine to give back. We have enough students. We're also engaging right now in conversation with housing. We have housing needs. That's something that we're on the point with right now. We hope to have that wrapped up in the next few weeks or months to bring housing to downtown Mesa for our students. So we're moving. We're doing the right things. We could move a lot quicker, and we could do a lot more if we just had the resources to reinvest in those. This initiative allows us to do that. Without that, we will still continue, but it will be longer and it will be a harder struggle for us. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I hope I've addressed some of the pieces of this that benefit Benedictine, and we're grateful to be considered in that mix.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the Benedictine has done for our community and will continue to do. We look forward to working with you for many years to come. I do have a couple of other cards for folks that have indicated a willingness to speak. Jackson Wright. Jackson, thank you for being here. If you could just state your name and your address,
Sure.
we'd appreciate it for our record.
Jackson Wright, 623 West Camino Circle, Mesa, 85201.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank the council and the city for bringing this opportunity to us for ASU and higher education. I think it's been the higher education support and the things that have already come here with Benedictine, Wilkes University, those types of things have been a great asset to West Mesa, to Mesa. As a long-standing resident of Mesa, 85201 is where I'm born and raised and still continue to have my family here. I see the growth. I see what the city council is doing and has done, and I'm excited about it. And I think this project moves another step closer to achieving the goals that we have for our city. As a business director of business, Larry John Wright Advertising in West Mesa, I see the advantages of having the higher education here. Bringing more people to downtown Mesa, the area, can only help in increasing the traffic and the patrons that we have visiting our downtown Mesa area. I'm excited about the housing opportunities, the market rate housing opportunities, and possibly the student housing opportunities that will also bring, and the revenue that will generate for Mesa. I'll be honest, I was not aware of that part of this was a public safety issue as well. I'm very excited about that. We need more police officers patrolling our streets. We need more firefighter support in the neighborhoods. Again, being in West Mesa, that's something that we push for. I have 3 loves in Arizona: Mesa, my ASU Sun Devils, and Lake Powell. I won't tell you what order those are in, but
I'm sure your family has something to do with that.
I'm talking, yeah. Well,
Okay.
yeah. I thought that was a given, but
Sure, yeah. I know your family is the reason I mentioned that.
I'm just very excited about this project. Not here in any way, shape, or form supporting or as a representative of a group that we have as the Action Neighborhood Alliance, but I know that this project in the 2 positions that have been brought forth to the council, to the city today, with the public safety and the higher education, help facilitate some of the goals that we have with bringing in, raising the median income in West Mesa, as well as increasing our safety in this area. So I'm all in favor of this. Whether it takes a tax increase to do that, I'm for that. Whatever that needs, you have my support as a Mesa resident and as a business owner. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Yes, Mr.
Jackson,
Richards.
thanks.
Yeah.
I don't really have a question. I just want to give some kudos to Jack. Jackson's my constituent who lives in District 1, as does your 8 brothers and sisters. I think maybe one doesn't live.
One does. So yeah, 8 of us. Do,
and
yeah.
your mother and father and their business is all located. So they've all made significant investments in the neighborhoods in my district, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come down and talk about your passions and your support for this. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Also have a card from Jerry Lewis. Jerry, welcome. If you would, please just give us your name and address for the record.
I'm Jerry Lewis. I live at 1303 West 7th Street in Vice Mayor Kavanaugh's District Number 3. Been there for 34 years. And I come today with several points. First off, we do need more police and fire. There's unequivocally no other answer. They're doing a great job. Both entities are doing a great job of answering the needs of a growing city. But when you consider how much we've grown and how much we've cut back on public safety workers, the disparity is only getting larger and larger, and we have to put our money where our mouth is and bring in more personnel and equipment to support those personnel. On another matter, with regards to the higher education, I'm an educator, but I'm also a businessman. And I understand the tax implications, but I think it's the voters' choice to decide what vision do they want for the city of Mesa. What do they want the vision for their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and on down the line to be? What's it going to look like 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now? Growing up here for the last 34 years, we've always been known as the doormat to Tempe or Phoenix, and in some people's eyes, Apache Junction. Not a good distinction. Who do we really want to become? I love the movement that began many years ago with many of you here in making Mesa, Arizona an education mecca, a place of higher learning. We've always had great K through 12 education here. In fact, that is what ultimately helped me and my wife decide to move to Mesa. Dad moved here and always praised the public school system. I had a little sister that was attending here, started at Whitman Elementary School, went through Carson and Westwood High School, and had a great experience. We decided, because of the schools, we wanted to live in Arizona, we wanted to live specifically in Mesa, and we wanted to be in the west part of Mesa as well. But that's not enough. Consider Boston, Massachusetts, the Silicon Valley, the Tri-City area of North Carolina. What's the image that is extant in those 3 areas and other areas around the nation? They're education capitals, higher education capitals. They are places where businesses want to locate because they know there's going to be an educated workforce. They are places where those town leaders, in some cases centuries ago, decided that these are going to be education havens. We are going to have an educated workforce. We're going to have an educated society. One of the things we teach our kids in the elementary schools that I superintend, from the very beginning, identify which college you want to go to. And every day in my duty as an acting principal at our Tempe Children First Academy, former Thomas J. Pappas School for the Homeless, I lead them in an affirmation. Those affirmations change somewhat from day to day. Some days I'll say, and they repeat everything I say, will be nice to my neighbor. I will try my hardest on my benchmark assessments today. But every day there's 2 constants. I will graduate from high school. I will graduate from college. We say that every day, and every kid, at our school, they know that. And then the last thing they always say, most of all, I love myself. Those are some affirmations that we want our kids to instill in their minds early on. If a child is looking towards college, then the graduation rate, or the idea of graduating from high school is a foregone conclusion. They realize to get to college, they have to graduate from high school. Consider the image that is in their mind about going to college and their decision as to whether to drop out when they're sophomores or 16 years of age or to continue on so they can receive that higher education. I believe we'll see higher promotion graduation rates. With the image of an educated Mesa, I believe we'll also see a lot stronger and more educated workforce that will attract greater commerce to our city. One of the things as I go around and talk with constituents, hopefully constituents in District 3, and while I was a state senator, as I spoke with many constituents, they want higher paying jobs in Mesa. They want to be something other than just the used car lot that was depicted in that movie, that B movie, whatever it was, many years ago. They want to shake those images of being the next door neighbor to Tempe and the next city over from Phoenix. They want an educated workforce. We create an education mecca. We create an image of higher education. And it's not just an image that we're all contriving in our minds. It's something that's well-funded and well-founded, something that really becomes a reality. I believe the proposal to bring Arizona State University into Mesa is a very good one, and I will also strongly consider Vice Mayor Kavanaugh's suggestion to actually increase the amount of tax so we can do it sooner rather than later and attract even more universities so that our children, our grandchildren, and everyone else that will come to Mesa will see it as something that it really is and eventually can become. That, like Boston, not that I want to be compared with Boston, great city, not that I want to be compared with the Silicon Valley, great place, or anywhere else, but we create our own vision. We become Mesa, the education mecca of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Council, any other additional questions or comments regarding this agenda item? Mr. Thompson.
And I want to reiterate also that I'm not opposed to ASU. I think it'd be a great thing for our city. What I'm opposed to is implementing a tax increase on a funding source that's unstable. I don't think it's smart. I would rather see something that's more sustainable, something that can go into perpetuity to serve our public safety. And once again, I do support our public safety as well, but it's an unstable funding source using tax revenue.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Richens.
To that end, Mr. Brady, we've seen huge fluctuations in sales tax revenues over the years. You know, at least since I've been on council, I don't know that we've had a real solid budget that we've been able to bank on. So say revenues come in lower than expected, how are we going to be able to have the flexibility to deal with that issue going forward?
Right. Mayor, Councilmember Richens, thank you for that. So remember, we've been doing this since 1998, and we hired, again, the numbers that Candace put up there, over 100 police officers and how many firefighters?
120 police officers and 65 firefighters.
So all those commitments were made, shortly after 1998, and so when we hit the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, we had to make adjustments, and that's where you often hear about holding up on hiring positions and then filling positions. So that's how we manage it, just like we would any other commitment that we have in the city. We match the resources up with the needs. And so in the past, that's what we've had to do. Now we're slowly moving back where we're able to fill many of those positions. But we are able to, we essentially just hold filling positions and trying to match the resources with the demand. But we've been doing that. We have, like we said, we have several positions today that are in the budget that are funded by the dedicated sales tax, and we've been able to manage that.
So you feel like you have enough resiliency in the system, because part of this is to pay debt service, which isn't cuttable. It's not really something you can, hold a position open or lay anybody off about. Debt is debt, and it demands its payment. So, is there enough resiliency in the system to be able to meet those debt obligations under this rubric?
Thank you for asking that. I think that what we would have to do, as we meet with future councils, that just talks about how we develop our reserves and plan for the capacity to absorb those in the future. What will happen, just like when we've committed a pledge of our sales tax to build other items, but not too much capital, but Cubs Stadium and hangars, we just have to make sure we have enough in our reserves that we have a couple of years to absorb that if it doesn't fall through.
Okay.
So that's what we would do, is just look at our reserves and our debt service to make sure we've got a couple of years. And if we believe, most time we believe if we can make it with our reserves for a couple of years, then we eventually work ourselves out of a cycle. And that's seems to hold true. And I think we'll just have to be very prudent in the amount of debt, to your point, that we would obligate under a sales tax. And if there's a way for some of these dollars to, as much as possible, to pay cash, then that would be my preference. And if we can fund some of the soft cost, as much of the soft cost with cash, but again, it's just, that's how we'll have to manage it all that way around.
Well, as I recall, when we did the quality of life, and Councilmember Kavanaugh, you can probably lend a little bit more insight this than, because you've been around longer, but as we did the quality of life sales tax for the Arts Center, there was a period of accumulation of the half cent for the capital, and then when the Arts Center was built, it wasn't paid for with debt. It was paid for. Now, I know that from a timing standpoint, we want to be a little bit quicker than the accumulation period that we would need to pay cash for all of this. And in the proposals for a quarter versus half, I mean, is there a way to accelerate that debt payment so we can rid ourselves of it quicker?
You could. I guess what I was imagining when I heard the vice mayor suggest this, I was writing over here, was trying not so much figuring out, I was trying to figure out a way, if you were to go to half cent, how you'd split up the rate so you put more of that. Obviously, you don't, I mean, I think if we kept the higher education, I mean, the higher education wants obviously just as much as it could, but if you took this is just the city manager talking, if you took a half cent and you split it so that 3.35% of that went to all the public safety, I mean, you're almost tripling what we're proposing today, and the other 0.15% would just be available for the higher education project. Remember, the higher education project, we haven't included phase 2, and we're not sure. And I'm a little concerned about making sure the parking number is good, but that would be a split that would almost get, it's about 2.7 times more funds than what we proposed on the quarter cent if you go to the half cent. So it's a big increase.
I think I would feel far more comfortable using, if we're going to have a higher rate, to use it to eliminate the debt first and then roll that into additional public safety needs. So, you go the increment, because it's the debt load that about this project.
I appreciate that. I think the concern is the expectation on what would mean, though, is you wouldn't be able to ramp up the public safety side as fast as you might, because you would have to hold off.
No, I understand that, and I'm fine, because we get halfway there with this proposal.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And so, within 5 years,
I guess
you eliminate the debt on the higher education stuff, and then you can keep going the other.
Yeah, it would just take quite a few years.
We could just model that. Maybe.
Yeah,
I know that we're not making.
Let's not do that in my head
today. Yeah.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. We can come back with some thoughts on that.
Always what's the joke? The Sun Devil is in the details, right? And I would know we have an IGA that we'll be reviewing in executive session shortly. So I'm not prepared to totally make judgment on this one way or the other, but it checks a lot of interesting boxes for stuff that we've wanted to do.
Sure.
And knowing, it's being on council now almost 8 years, I also know that I don't have the ability to raise taxes. I just have the ability to put a proposal in front of voters, which is what we've done time and time again. And the Mesa voters, who are very smart, very educated, and have always made good decisions, and they've rejected some, they've accepted some proposals that have been put in front of them. I think they're smart the way they do that. So I trust Mesa voters to weigh the options and make a good decision. And I had one of my constituents that I really admire and respect come in and talk to me about it. And, Mr. Lewis, I wanted to stand and applaud when you were done. I appreciated the vision that you laid out, and I'm sure Mr. Kavanaugh regrets his endorsement now. So, just kidding. Brian's a great kid. No, but I really appreciated that you would stand there and in the situation that you're in, really lay out your vision for how you felt about that. But I think the last thing I need to see, for the record, I still really don't like the location of Building 2. That really still bugs me. For some reason, it just seems out of place, and it doesn't fit right. And so we'll continue to negotiate on that, Mr. McVeigh, about how that is situated within that thing. So anyway, thanks.
Great. Yes, Mr. Finter.
So speaking of debt, if we can get, I know we're at high altitude as we're looking at this, but debt service, we're talking about levels of debt, and we know where we're at on what's allowed under state law. But the debt service payments, you're going to have several proposals, 20 years, 10 years. You hear maybe pay cash up front. There's some significant numbers in that aren't reflected in some of these principal amounts that we're putting on, and just like to have a little bit more information along
And
those lines.
We'll provide that too. We've run the numbers. Again, we just done it and estimated at 120 million, and even after you take out issuance cost, we've used a pretty conservative interest rate and a term of 20 years. Even after delinquency factors, we see that debt service is just over $10 million a year.
$10 million.
Yeah.
Just for the interest on the.
No, that's principal.
Principal.
That's the total debt
Principal
service. That's the debt service, yeah.
Over 20?
That's correct. That's correct.
Great.
So that's where we feel comfortable. That's where that 12 gives us some cushion for years out in case things don't work out. Or we can use that to help pay down cash. So if there's some items we can pay early on and not have to bond against, that would be helpful too.
Please, yeah.
Has anybody done the cost-benefit analysis?
Oh, thank you.
ROI on this thing?
Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah.
I was going to bring it up, and then so there we have there has been a economic impacts analysis that has been that is drafted, and we just literally got it this week, and I needed time to look at it. But there is we want to share that with council because what this group has done is looked at our current inventory of businesses and hotels and activity in the downtown Mesa area. And then they've gone and compared what has happened in other communities where they've brought in higher education projects and talked about the difference between what they had before and what investments occurred since then. And then they've tried to apply that same model for downtown Mesa. It's pretty significant. So in one way to look at this too is, and that's the other reason I think we would endorse the sales tax, is because one of the things that it does generate is the probability that there'll be more housing, more business activity in the downtown area, which will generate sales tax dollars to help compensate back indirectly from additional broader sales tax coming into the city. So if you'll just give us, maybe we probably need to about the middle or first part of next week just to kind of scrub through the numbers, and then we'll bring that report, release that report so the council and the community can see the impact analysis that's been done on the project.
Great. Thank you. It's probably a good time to remind ourselves just of the calendaring of this project. A week from now, the proposal is to hopefully come back and have the details of the intergovernmental agreement with ASU ironed out. But then we still have until mid-June before we will call the election. And we have really up until that time to debate some of what I think some really good ideas that have been discussed today of accelerating the debt payment.
Correct.
And then I'm still curious to talk a little more with police and fire admin. If we're adding 48 to 52 police officers at one time, that seems like a lot to absorb. And I understand that the budget presentation a couple of weeks ago suggested a number higher than that, but I'm not sure that you'd hire that many more officers in one fell swoop. And I have some additional questions to just work through.
Well, and yes, Mayor, I think what we would recommend too, because I think there's a certain capacity, but recognizing having a plan over a 4 or 5 year period to bring those officers in. What we would most likely do, we've talked about this in those years where we're still waiting for a police officer to go through the academy and come out, that'll be a great time is kind of working with the council and the police departments is maybe that's where we do a lot of the purchases of equipment and get those in place because those are essentially one-time dollars at the beginning and get some of those purchases done ahead of the a personnel cost that's going to be recurring so that helps us kind of balance that out. Before we actually have the officer on the street, we can have some of the equipment already purchased or committed in the budget going forward. So that's one of the things we've looked at.
And so those types of details we can continue to discuss over the next month or so, absolutely. Correct? Mr. Richards?
And just to clarify, this is for the November ballot.
Yes, November 8th.
The November 8th.
Yeah. You would call, but the council would need to call the election, the decision and the amounts would have to be set on June 20th.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, council. Any additional questions? Mr. Glover, did we give you an opportunity to speak if you wanted one?
Yes, I would just say I want to echo probably Councilmember Witchen's words. I am very hesitant to support a sales tax just because I feel that with online shopping, that is going to kind of impact how we will be collecting that as well. So that's where I stand and my fear is.
Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is item 2, information relating to job order contracting projects. Council, any questions regarding those items? Hearing none, the next is hear reports on meetings and conferences attended. I have something to share. Yesterday, I had the great opportunity to go to Westwood High School and participate in a great assembly in the middle of that campus to celebrate Westwood High School's selection as an A-plus school. That's a really big deal, and it was very exciting to see that community get so excited about celebrating that. As I was standing there clapping and celebrating Westwood's achievements, I was next to Dr. Cowan, and there are 40 A-plus schools this year. 9 of those are Mesa Public Schools. So we talk about Mesa being a community that's known for a good education program, and that's certainly not that is aspirational, but it's also reflective of where we are right now. Mesa Public Schools is doing a great job. So congratulations to Westwood and the other A-plus schools in the district. Any other, Mr. Brady, scheduling of meetings and general information.
Again, let me please remind everyone that we invite you to join Vice Mayor Kavanaugh for coffee with a council member on Friday, May 20th, tomorrow from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. at the Fiesta District Police Station located at 1010 West Grove. And our next study session will be Thursday, May 26th at 7 a.m.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion to enter into an executive session. All in favor, please say aye. Thank you. We are in executive session.
It's a tradition now.